Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more buckshot testing. And today we've got another new shell that we've never tried before, and it's one that several of you guys have requested to see or have said that you have gotten some pretty good results from. So I'm definitely looking forward to testing it and seeing what we can get out of it, because at least in theory I think we should see some decent results through today's combo, but we just don't really know until we try it. But as for the shells I've brought out here today, I got some of these, some Federal Power-Shok 20 gauge buckshot shells. These ones in particular are a 20 gauge 3-inch 18 pellet load of 2-buck moving about 1100 feet per second. Now I don't know that we've ever tried any 2-buck here on the channel, regardless of it being a 20 gauge or not, so I'm definitely curious to see how that does. So definitely a very interesting load, but what kind of performance can it actually give us? That's going to be the big question. And as for the setup I've got out here today to run those through, I brought out the Stevens 301 20 gauge. Technically this is the turkey model, but all that means is a camouflage stock and came with a turkey choke from the factory. There's nothing else fancy or special about it. But as for a choke, I threw in this guy. This is a stock style flush full choke. Now if you haven't seen, last week we tested some of the 3-buck 20 gauge shells from Federal through this 301 with a flush factory style modified choke, and they were a little disappointing to say the least. I typically start with a full choke when I test a lot of buckshot shells, but a lot of you guys said to try out a modified, so that's where we started. But since it didn't really work out for us, I'm gonna kind of go back to the usual on how I do things when it comes to buckshot and throw a full choke in the gun and see what it does. So we'll see how these 2-buck shells actually do through this full choke, and I will quickly put up the actual constriction of this particular full choke here on the screen for those of you curious as well. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what this combination can do. But as for the test today, everything is set up the same as usual. I've got the big sheet of paper at 40 yards. I've got the chronograph so we can get our velocity out of the shell. And I've got the templates that we lay up over our target for a little better reference as to how they actually patterned. So enough talking, let's get you guys to view this target and take the shot and see just what kind of a pattern we're able to get from the Federal Power-Shok 20 gauge buckshot shells, with them being 2-buck through a flush full choke here today. Okay, so that shell gave us 1,039 through the chrono. The bot's claim is 1,100, so that's 61 feet per second under their claim. And when we tested the 3-buck Federal Power-Shoks last week, they were a touch under their claim as well, pretty similar to this. So I think just out of my setup, and who knows, maybe those Federal shells in general are just running a little bit slower than their claim. I definitely wouldn't mind seeing another, 100, 150 feet per second up closer to the 1150 to 1200 mark, personally, out of these shells anyway, but I guess we're not too far out of the realm of reality considering their claim is only 1100. But what kind of a pattern were they able to give us down at 40 yards? Let's go check it out and see if it's any better than what we saw out of the 3-buck shells last week. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and this is what we got. And I gotta say, this is terrible, to say the least. Not even close to what I was hoping to see or even kind of expecting to see. I don't know that I was expecting to see anything outstanding necessarily as far as the pattern goes, but this is just terrible. Now this paper is 36 inches wide by probably about 40 or 42 inches tall, and we only had 13 out of the 18 pellets even hit the paper down here. I do think number 14 is up in the top center board right up there, and number 15 is stuck right over here in that hole. So I guess we could say we know where 15 out of the 18 pellets went, but as you can clearly see, that is absolutely terrible. And it might even be a little bit of a donut style pattern as well. We kind of only have one right where our point of aim was there. The rest of them are all pretty just circular around in the corners of the paper. It's just not very good looking. So that is nothing short of a huge disappointment. And I think it's probably caused by several reasons out of these shells. Number one, these shells do not use any kind of a wad. They are buffered, but they don't use any wad, and wads definitely seem to help in a lot of buckshot shells. And number two, they do not appear to be any kind of a plated shot. I think it's just plain old lead pellets with a little bit of buffer material stuffed into a shell. So the combination of them not having a wad and not being copper plated or anything like that, I think that really hurts these shells big time. Now, of course, we might be able to do a little better with a little bit different choke. Who knows? Maybe they like a little less choke. Maybe they like quite a bit more choke? I really don't know. And to be honest with you, I don't think a template laying up over there is going to do much for us in the grand scheme of things. I think it pretty well already tells us all we need to know. If we put a 10-inch circle template up there in the middle, we would have one pellet right there above the white dot in there. Definitely not great, that's for sure. But I guess if nothing else, I'll put the deer template up there for a few seconds just to see what it would look like if you picked up a box of these shells and took your setup out in the woods without any testing, and we can just see what kind of a pattern you would have actually been dealing with. So let's throw the deer template up for a second and take a peek. All right, here's our deer template, and clearly it is not very good, to put it lightly. Would you have killed this deer? Probably so, unfortunately, but would you have recovered the deer? That I'm not so certain of. This one pellet is maybe through enough of a vital area where it might have done some damage, but it is just a little bit high for lungs, a little touch back for shoulder, not quite high enough for spine. So I don't know that it really would have got into a whole lot. You did have one back here far back into the guts, which probably would have been more so the kill shot than that other pellet, but definitely not great. I mean, we might have had one through the center of his neck over here just off the template. So would you have gotten the deer? Probably so, or at least killed the deer. I don't know about recovering it though, but that is not even in the same world as a pattern that I would want to take out hunting. That is terrible, and there's really not any other way to put it. Now, does it come down to the shells, the way they're loaded, no wad, no plating? Does it come down to just that particular 301 with the choke combo we tried? I think it's more so the shell's fault, but who knows? I guess we should try these through a couple different chokes and see what happens with them, but definitely nothing short of a complete and utter failure and huge disappointment for a start here, that's for sure. All right, y'all. Well, what did you think about that pattern right there? That is just all over the place. I think we've seen better patterns out of the super, super cheap, terribly loaded import 12 gauge shells through cylinder bore chokes before than what we saw out of that. That's terrible. That is not even close to what I was expecting or hoping to see. And I think the way the shells are loaded plays a big part into that. No wad, no plating. I definitely don't think helps these shells. But who knows? Maybe there's some other magical choke out there that'll work better. Maybe they might like a little more constriction or might need a little more constriction to potentially start to overcome some of those downfalls in the way they're loaded. Maybe they might like hardly any constriction at all for very little or no disruption in the actual pellets. I don't know. We're just going to have to do some more testing with it and see, I guess. But that is nothing short of a terribly disappointing start. But as always, leave your thoughts in the comments. Is that about what you expected? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of these Federal Power-Shok 20 gauge buckshot shells regardless of the shot size? And if so, what kind of results have you seen? Is there another choke that you think we should try with these? A little tighter, a little more open, something like that? And overall, just where do you think we should go from here with these shells? Let me know all your thoughts down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.